The stagecoach door opened, and Nora Byrne stepped into the March wind, 6 months pregnant and shivering. The man who'd promised her a new life stood 30 feet away, dirt still clinging to his boots. Between them lay 3 graves, so fresh the earth hadn't settled. Before we dive into the story, leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. We love hearing from viewers around the world. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss tomorrow's incredible story. Now let's continue with the story. Silas Crow didn't look up when the stage rattled to a halt at the edge of his land. His gaze had been fixed on the 3 wooden crosses for so long that the rest of the world had faded into something distant and unreal. The tallest cross bore his wife's name, Catherine Ann Crow. Beneath it, 2 smaller markers stood side by side, their carvings painfully simple. Beloved daughter and beloved son. They had never lived long enough to receive the names Catherine had whispered to him at night. The driver's voice sliced through the cold wind. "This the Crow Ranch?" Silas turned slowly. A woman stood beside the stagecoach, one hand braced against the small of her back, the other gripping a worn carpet bag. Her condition was impossible to miss. Her traveling coat strained over the round swell of her belly, and her face carried the hollow exhaustion of someone who had spent weeks confined to narrow seats and borrowed air. "Mr. Crow?" Her voice trembled. "I'm Nora Byrne, from Boston. We've been corresponding since December." The words reached him as if through water. December. Another life. A time when Catherine was still alive, still laughing, still planning, still carrying their twins and insisting they would need help on the ranch. She had written the advertisement herself. She had sorted through the replies. She had chosen Nora. "I wrote you," Silas said at last. His voice sounded torn from him. "A month ago. Told you circumstances had changed." Nora's face drained of color. "I never received anything," she whispered. "I left Boston 6 weeks ago." The driver dragged her trunk down from the coach. $2 for handling." Silas paid without thought, his eyes never leaving the woman who should not have been standing there, never leaving the unmistakable curve of her belly. The children she carried, alive, pressed against the rawest place in his chest. "Mr. Crow," Nora said softly. Her gaze had found the graves. She was doing the mathematics, reading the dates carved into the wood. All 3 deaths. The same day. Just 2 weeks past. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." The driver climbed back onto his seat. "Stage don't come back through for 3 weeks, ma'am. You need a ride somewhere. You'll have to arrange it yourself." He snapped the reins, and the horses lurched forward. Nora watched the coach disappear down the rutted trail. When she turned back, Silas was walking toward the cabin, his shoulders rigid with grief. "Mr. Crow, please. I have nowhere else to go." He stopped but didn't turn around. "Neither do I." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming snow. Nora looked at the graves, at the cabin, at the man who'd become a stranger to himself. She picked up her carpet bag and followed him inside. The cabin was colder inside than it was outdoors. Nora paused in the doorway, watching Silas move through the room as if he barely existed in it. He lit a lamp without glancing her way, the flame flaring weakly, then vanished into a small room at the back of the house. She set her carpet bag down and took stock of what surrounded her. A rough table with 2 chairs pulled close together. A cookstove cold to the touch, unused for days. Dishes stacked in a wash basin, food dried hard along their edges. The air carried the smell of ash and abandonment. Through the open doorway of the back room, she could see him standing perfectly still, staring at something just out of view. "Mr. Crow," she said softly, "when did you last eat?" He didn't answer. Nora turned to the stove and opened the firebox. The coals inside were long dead. She found kindling beside it and coaxed a fire to life, her movements steady and practiced, despite the weight of her belly pulling her balance forward. In the pantry she uncovered flour, salt, and a handful of shriveled potatoes. Not much, but enough. She was peeling the potatoes when Silas came back into the main room. He'd changed his shirt, but the emptiness in his face hadn't shifted. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied, not looking up. "But I'm hungry, and I imagine you are too." He sat at the table, elbows resting on the worn wood, watching her work. The minutes stretched, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. "The father," he said at last, his voice roughened by disuse. "Where is he?" Nora's hands went still. "Boston. Married to someone else by now, I expect." "He knew about the babies?" "He knew." She resumed peeling, her jaw tightening. "He offered to pay for a procedure. When I refused, he offered to pay for a train ticket instead. West was cheaper than a wedding, apparently." Silas nodded once, absorbing that. "Your family?" "My father died when I was 12. My mother remarried a man who made it clear I wasn't welcome once I turned 18. She dropped a potato into the pot with more force than necessary. "I worked as a seamstress, saved for my own shop. Then I met Daniel at a church social." Her mouth tightened. "He was charming, said all the right things. I believed him." "The letters I received," Silas said slowly. "They didn't mention any of this." Nora turned to face him. "Your wife wrote to me in January, said you needed help with the ranch, that she was expecting twins and would need another woman's hands. I wrote back that I was eager to start fresh, to be useful. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell the whole truth. And if I'd known, you wouldn't have accepted me." She met his gaze steadily. "I know that, but I was desperate, Mr. Crow. I had $60 to my name and 2 babies coming. Your wife's letter felt like providence." Silas stood abruptly and walked to the window. Outside, dusk was settling over the mountains. Snow had begun to fall. Catherine wanted children more than anything in this world. His voice cracked. She prayed for them every night for 7 years. When she finally got pregnant, she was so happy she cried. And then they killed her. All 3 of them. Gone in one night. Nora's throat tightened. "I can't imagine your pain." "No," he said quietly. "You can't." He turned from the window. "The nearest town is Badger Creek, 40 miles south through the passes. Won't be clear until May, maybe later if the snow keeps up. You're stuck here until then." "I understand." "Do you?" His eyes were hard. "You'll be sleeping in the room I built for my children, eating at the table where my wife sat, living in a dead woman's house." Nora lifted her chin. "Then I'll do my best to honor her memory by keeping it standing." Something flickered across his face. Not quite respect, but close. "Eat when the food's ready," he said. "I'll be in the barn." The door closed behind him, and Nora was alone with the sound of simmering potatoes and falling snow. Nora woke to complete darkness. For a few heartbeats, she didn't know where she was. Panic flickered, sharp and brief. Then her hand brushed the curve of her belly, and memory flooded back all at once. The cabin. The 3 graves outside. The man whose grief soaked into the walls like cold. She pushed herself upright, her back aching in protest. The air bit at her skin. It was bitterly cold. She fumbled on the bedside table until her fingers found the matches and struck one, lighting the lamp. That was when she saw them. 2 cradles stood against the far wall, fashioned from pale, smooth pine. Each was lined with a quilt, the stitching so careful, and even it could only have been done slowly, patiently, over months. Between them sat a rocking chair. Beside it, a basket filled with tiny clothes folded with meticulous care, gowns small enough to fit in her palm, knitted booties, a christening dress edged with delicate lace at the collar. Nora's breath hitched. She crossed the room on unsteady legs and laid her fingers along the cradle nearest her. The wood was flawless, every edge sanded soft. No splinters, no rough places that could harm fragile skin. She nudged the rocker gently. It moved perfectly, balanced just right. One of the babies kicked hard against her ribs. She pressed her hand to the spot, feeling the insistent movement beneath her palm. Life. Strong and restless and undeniable. The children inside her were alive, growing, demanding room, demanding a future. And she stood there, surrounded by careful preparations made for babies who had never been brought home. The door opened. Silas stood in the doorway, a bucket of water in his hand. He froze when he saw where she was. "I'll move them," he said flatly. "Should have done it already." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "Please don't. You can't sleep in here with... They're beautiful." Nora touched the edge of one quilt. "Your wife made these?" Silas set down the bucket. "Took her all winter. She'd sit by the fire every evening, stitching, talking to them while she worked, telling them about the ranch, about the mountains." His voice went rough. "About their father." "What did she tell them about you?" He looked away. "That I'd keep them safe. That I'd teach them to ride, to work cattle, to survive out here." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Lot of good that did. You can't blame yourself for what happened." "Can't I?" His eyes were fierce when they met hers. "Doc said the babies came early because she was doing too much. Lifting feed sacks, hauling water. I should have been there, should have stopped her. But I was 20 miles out checking fence lines." Nora understood then. The guilt wasn't just about losing them. It was about not being there when they needed him most. "She was strong," Nora said quietly. "Strong enough to marry a rancher and build a life out here. Strong enough to work beside you. You can't take that away from her by blaming yourself." Silas stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up the bucket and left. Nora sank into the rocking chair. It creaked softly as she moved, a sound meant to soothe fussy infants. She placed her hands on her belly, feeling the twins shift and turn. "I'll take care of you," she whispered. "Both of you. I promise." Through the thin walls, she heard Silas moving in the main room. The clatter of the stove being stoked, the scrape of a chair. She wondered if he slept at all, or if he just sat in the dark, counting his losses. Snow began to fall again outside the window, fat flakes that would pile up by morning, trapping them here together. Two strangers bound by circumstance and grief, living in a house built for a family that would never be. 3 days passed in careful silence. Silas left before dawn and returned after dark, spending every daylight hour in the barn or riding fence lines. Nora cleaned the cabin until her back ached, cooked meals he barely touched, and pretended not to notice the way he avoided looking at her. On the 4th morning, she woke to a sound like thunder. Wind hammered the cabin walls, and snow blew horizontal past the window. The blizzard had arrived. By noon, drifts were piling against the door. Nora fed the fire and rationed the firewood, unsure how long the storm would last. When Silas finally came in from the barn, ice clung to his beard and his lips were blue. "Can't get to the woodpile," he said, shaking snow from his coat. "Drifts are shoulder high on the north side." Nora glanced at the nearly empty wood box. How much do we have? Enough for 2 days if we're careful. Maybe 3. He moved to the stove, holding his hands over the heat. Storm like this could last a week. They rationed the wood that afternoon, burning just enough to keep from freezing. By evening, the temperature inside had dropped so low Nora could see her breath. She wrapped herself in every blanket she owned and sat at the table, trying to ignore the cold seeping into her bones. Silas paced like a caged animal, back and forth across the small room, his jaw clenched tight. "You should sit," Nora said finally. "Save your energy." "Can't," he kept pacing. "Need to think." "About what?" "About how to keep us from freezing to death in our sleep." The words hung in the frozen air. Nora pulled the blankets tighter, feeling one of the babies kick. Her hands were so cold she could barely feel it. Silas stopped pacing and looked at her directly for the first time in days. "The babies. When are they due?" "Late May. Early June at the latest." "And you're healthy? No problems?" "Some back pain. Exhaustion. But the midwife in Boston said I was strong." He nodded slowly, then resumed pacing. The wind shrieked outside, rattling the windows. "Why did you really come here?" The question came out harsh. "Truth this time." Nora met his gaze. "Because I was alone. Because I was scared. Because when your wife's letter arrived, it felt like someone actually wanted me to exist." Her voice cracked. "I know that sounds pathetic, but Daniel made it very clear that I was a mistake he wanted erased. Your wife's words were the first kindness I'd received in months." Silas stopped pacing. "What did she say?" "That she understood what it meant to start over. That the West was hard but honest. That a woman willing to work could find a place here." Nora's eyes burned. "She signed it your future friend, Catherine. Not Mrs. Crowe. Not formally. Like we were already family." Something shifted in Silas's expression. He crossed to the wood box and pulled out 3 logs. "What are you doing? We need to ration. We need to talk." He fed the logs into the stove. "Really talk. And I can't do that while you're turning blue." The fire caught, spreading warmth through the room. Silas pulled a chair close to the stove and gestured for Nora to do the same. "Tell me about the father," he said. "Everything. And then I'll tell you about Catherine." Outside, the blizzard raged. Inside, for the first time since Nora arrived, the silence began to thaw. Nora told him about Daniel first, about the promises whispered in garden courtyards, the ring he never bought, the way his face changed when she told him about the pregnancy, how he'd called her careless, how he'd slid an envelope across his desk with enough money for the procedure and a little extra to forget this unpleasantness. "I threw the money at him," she said, staring into the fire. "Told him I'd never forget, that these babies were real, whether he acknowledged them or not." Silas listened without judgment, his face unreadable. "He had me removed from his office by his clerk, like I was some beggar off the street. 3 days later, a different envelope arrived. Train ticket to Montana Territory, and a note that said I'd be wise to take it before his reputation suffered." "And you took it?" "What choice did I have?" Nora's hands trembled. "I had no family, no prospects. I was 3 months along and showing. No respectable household would hire me. I was facing the streets or worse." Silas fed another log to the fire. "Catherine would have taken you in, even without the mail order arrangement. She had a soft heart for women in trouble." "Tell me about her." He was quiet for so long, Nora thought he wouldn't answer. Then he started talking, his voice low and rough. "Met her in Denver, 8 years back. I was selling cattle. She was working in a boarding house. Most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. And she gave me the time of day for reasons I still don't understand." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She had this laugh that could light up a room, made everything feel possible. She sounds wonderful. She was stubborn as a mule and twice as ornery when she wanted to be. The smile faded. Took her 2 years to get pregnant. Every month that passed without it happening, I watched a little more hope die in her eyes. When she finally told me about the twins, I'd never seen her so happy. Nora felt the babies shift inside her, a sensation so familiar now she barely noticed it. Except Silas noticed. His eyes dropped to her belly, watching the movement beneath her dress. "Does it hurt?" he asked quietly. "When they move like that?" "Sometimes. Mostly it's just uncomfortable, like they're running out of room." "Can I—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Never mind. You want to feel them?" He stood abruptly, moved to the window. Snow pressed against the glass in heavy sheets. "Wouldn't be right." "Why not?" "Because they're not mine to feel. And because every time I look at you, I see what Catherine should have had. What she deserved." Nora rose carefully, crossing to stand beside him. "I can't replace her. I'd never try. But I'm here, Silas. And so are these babies. And we're all stuck in this storm together." She took his hand before she could lose her nerve and placed it on her belly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one of the twins kicked hard against his palm. Silas's breath caught. His hand spread wider, feeling the shape of a tiny foot pressing outward. Another kick, then another. 2 distinct movements. "They're strong," he whispered. "They have to be." Nora kept her hand over his. "They're coming into a hard world." They stood like that as the storm raged outside, connected by the insistent kicks of children who refused to be ignored. When Silas finally pulled his hand away, his eyes were wet. "Grace and Samuel," he said. "Those were the names Catherine chose." "Then that's what I'll call them." Something broke open in his chest. Not healing. Not yet. But the first crack in the wall he'd built around his grief. The blizzard broke on the 5th day. Silas dug them out while Nora prepared a sparse breakfast from their dwindling supplies. When he came back inside, stamping snow from his boots, his face was grim. "Need to ride to Doc Voss. See if he can come check on you." "I'm fine." "You winced 3 times this morning reaching for the coffee pot. Your back's getting worse." Nora wanted to argue, but another sharp pain seized her lower spine. She gripped the table edge, breathing through it. Silas crossed the room in 2 strides. "How long has it been this bad?" "Just the past few days. The cold makes it worse." "I'm getting Doc." He was gone within the hour, riding hard toward Badger Creek. Nora tried to work through the pain, but by afternoon she could barely stand. She lowered herself into the rocking chair in the nursery, pressing both hands to her back. One of the babies kicked sharply against her ribs. Then the other joined in, a flurry of movement that made her gasp. They'd been more active lately, running out of space, as Silas said. Sometimes she could see the outline of a foot or hand pressing against her skin, visible proof of the life inside her. The door burst open. Doc Harlan Voss entered, followed by Silas. The doctor was a lean man in his 50s, with sharp eyes and gentle hands. "Let's have a look at you, Mrs. Byrne." "It's just Miss." Doc raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He examined her carefully, pressing along her spine, checking the position of the babies. His hand stilled when he felt her belly. "Their head down. Both of them. That's good." He straightened. "But they're big. Very big. And you're carrying them low." "What does that mean?" "Means they might come early. Means you need to be careful. No heavy lifting, no bending. And for God's sake, stay warm. Cold stress can bring on labor." Nora's chest tightened. "How early?" "Could be weeks. Could be days." Doc looked at Silas. "She needs to be watched." Someone with her at all times in case labor starts. Silas nodded, his jaw set. I'll be here. After Doc left, promising to check back in a week, Silas stoked the fire until the cabin was almost too warm. He moved the rocking chair closer to the heat and guided Nora into it. You should have told me the pain was this bad. You had enough to worry about. That's not your decision to make. His voice was sharp. Those babies come early, and something goes wrong. I'll have 4 graves on that hill instead of 3. The words hung between them, brutal and honest. I can't lose anyone else, he said quietly. I won't. Nora looked up at him. I'm not Catherine. I know that. He knelt beside the chair, meeting her eyes. But you're carrying Grace and Samuel, and that makes you my responsibility now. Is that all I am? A responsibility? Silas was quiet for a long moment. I don't know what you are yet, but I know I'll be here when those babies come. I promised you that, and I keep my promises. He stood and moved to the door. I'll bring in more firewood, and tomorrow I'm moving my bedroll to the main room. You need help in the night. I'll hear you. Nora watched him go, something warm unfurling in her chest despite the pain in her back. For the first time since Daniel had cast her aside, she didn't feel alone. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, turning the snow-covered mountains gold. March melted into April. The snow retreated slowly, revealing brown grass and mud. Nora's belly grew impossibly larger, and simple tasks became challenges. Silas watched her like a hawk, appearing at her elbow whenever she reached for something heavy or bent too far. One evening, she found him in the nursery, running sandpaper over the cradle rockers, even though they were already smooth as glass. They're perfect, she said from the doorway. Want to make sure. He didn't look up. Catherine made me promise to get every detail right. Nora eased herself into the rocking chair. Tell me more about her, about what she wanted for them. Silas set down the sandpaper. She wanted Grace to be brave, not foolish brave, but the kind that stands up when it matters. And Samuel, she wanted him to be gentle. Said the world had enough hard men already. Those are good things to want. She picked the names because of their meanings. Grace for unearned blessing. Samuel for God has heard. His voice roughened. She prayed so hard for those babies. Every night on her knees, thanking God for finally hearing her. And then he took them anyway. Don't. Silas's hands clenched. Don't make me say what I think about that. Nora understood. Faith was complicated when prayers went unanswered. She changed direction. What would you have taught them, if they'd lived? He looked at the cradles, seeing ghosts. How to read the weather, how to gentle a horse without breaking its spirit, how to survive when everything goes wrong. He paused. How to be better than me. You're a good man, Silas. You don't know that. You've known me a month. I know you buried your family and still found room to help a stranger. I know you keep your promises even when they hurt. That's enough. One of the babies kicked hard, and Nora gasped. Her hand flew to her side. What's wrong? Nothing. Just a strong kick. She guided his hand to the spot. Feel. The baby kicked again, a solid thump against Silas's palm. Then another movement on the other side. Both twins active at once. They do this every evening now, Nora said, like they're fighting for space. Silas kept his hand there, feeling the life pushing against his skin. Grace and Samuel, he murmured. That's really what you're calling them? If you don't mind. Catherine would have wanted that. His eyes met hers. She would have wanted them to have the names she chose, to know someone cared enough to remember. I'll tell them about her, when they're old enough to understand. About the woman who picked their names and prayed for children like them. Silas's throat worked. And their father? Will you tell them about him too? I'll tell them he was a coward who didn't deserve them, and that they have something better than his name. She hesitated. If you're willing. Willing to what? To be in their lives, to teach them the things Catherine wanted them to know. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications neither of them was ready to name. Silas pulled his hand back slowly. We should talk about what happens when the pass is clear, when you can leave. Do you want me to leave? I don't know what I want anymore. He stood, moved to the window. But I know those babies deserve better than a broken man and a borrowed name. They deserve someone who shows up, Nora said firmly. Someone who keeps promises. Everything else we can figure out together. Silas turned, really looking at her, at the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw. Catherine had looked like that sometimes, when she'd made up her mind about something. Together, he repeated softly. All right, then. The first pain came at dawn on a Tuesday in late April. Nora woke gasping, her hands clutching her belly as the contraction squeezed like a vice. When it passed, she lay still, counting her breaths. Too early. The babies weren't due for another month. She made it through breakfast without telling Silas, hoping it was false labor. But by noon, the pains were coming every 20 minutes, and she couldn't hide them anymore. Silas saw her grip the table edge, saw the color drain from her face. How long? Since dawn. He was out the door in seconds, racing toward the barn. Nora heard him saddling the horse, then hoofbeats thundering away. He'd gone for Doc Voss. The contractions intensified. Nora managed to get herself to the bed in the nursery before another one hit, stealing her breath. When it ended, she looked at the clock. 15 minutes since the last one. The babies were coming whether Doc arrived or not. An hour passed, then 2. The pains came faster now, harder. Nora stripped off her dress and wrapped herself in a sheet, her body slick with sweat despite the cool air. The door crashed open. Silas stood there, alone, covered in mud. Where's Doc? Bridge washed out. His face was ashen. Can't get across until the water drops. Could be hours. Another contraction seized her. Nora screamed, unable to stop herself. Silas was beside her instantly. Tell me what to do. I don't know. Tears streamed down her face. I've never done this before. Neither have I. His hands shook as he pushed her sweat-soaked hair back. But we're doing it anyway. He brought clean linens, hot water, a knife sterilized in the fire. Nora tried to remember everything the midwife in Boston had told her, but the pain was eating her thoughts. The baby's coming, she gasped. I can feel it. Silas positioned himself at the foot of the bed. Then push when you need to. The next contraction built like a wave. Nora bore down, her entire body straining. Then came a moment of impossible pressure, and suddenly the first baby slipped free into Silas's waiting hands. A girl, tiny and slick and utterly silent. Why isn't she crying? Nora's voice broke. Silas, why isn't she crying? He cleared the baby's mouth with his finger, then turned her over and patted her back. Nothing. He tried again, harder this time. Still nothing. No! The word ripped from his chest. No, not again. He laid the baby on the bed and bent over her, breathing gently into her tiny mouth. Once, twice, 3 times. A weak cry filled the room. Silas's hands trembled as he wrapped the baby in a clean cloth and placed her on Nora's chest. Grace, he whispered. Her name is Grace. Nora held her daughter, sobbing with relief, but there was no time to rest. Another contraction was building, stronger than before. The second one's coming. Silas moved back into position. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his eyes fierce with determination. Then we bring him home too. The pain consumed everything. Nora pushed until she thought she'd break, and then the boy was there, smaller than his sister, his lips tinged blue. He wasn't breathing at all. Silas worked faster this time, clearing the airway, breathing for the infant with steady, desperate rhythm. 30 seconds passed. A minute. "Come on," Silas begged. "Come on, Samuel, breathe." Nothing. He pressed gently on the tiny chest, breathed again. "Please, please don't leave." A gasp, then a wail, thin and reedy but strong. Silas collapsed against the bed, the baby clutched to his chest, both of them breathing hard. When he finally looked up at Nora, his face was wet with tears. "They're here," he said hoarsely. "Both of them. They're really here." Doc Voss arrived 3 hours later to find both babies nursing and Nora asleep. Silas sat in the rocking chair, Grace cradled in one arm, watching them with an expression the doctor had never seen on his face before. "You did this alone?" "Didn't have a choice." Silas's voice was rough from exhaustion. "The boy nearly didn't make it." Doc examined both infants thoroughly. "They're small but strong. You did good work, Silas." He checked Nora next, confirmed she was healing properly. "She needs rest, weeks of it, and those babies need constant watching. Premature twins are fragile." "I know." "Do you?" Doc's eyes were sharp. "Because taking care of newborns isn't like working cattle. You can't do this alone." "I won't be alone." Silas looked at Nora's sleeping form. "She's staying." "Is she now? Thought she was just passing through." "Plans changed." Doc packed his instruments, a small smile playing at his lips. "Catherine would be glad. She always said this place needed the sound of children." After he left, Silas placed Grace in her cradle and checked on Samuel. The boy was so small his whole body fit in Silas's, 2 hands. But his grip was fierce when Silas offered him a finger. "You're a fighter," Silas whispered. "Just like your mother." He meant Nora, he realized, not Catherine, the woman who'd carried these babies through fear and abandonment, who'd traveled across a continent alone, who'd pushed them into the world with nothing but raw courage. 3 weeks passed. The babies thrived despite their early arrival. Nora regained her strength slowly, and Silas learned the rhythm of infant care. Feeding schedules, diaper changes, the particular cries that meant hunger versus discomfort. One morning, Nora found him asleep in the rocking chair, both babies on his chest, all 3 of them peaceful. Something shifted in her chest, a recognition she'd been avoiding. This was what family looked like. That afternoon, she packed her carpet bag. Silas came in from the barn and froze when he saw it sitting by the door. "You're leaving." "The passes are clear. Doc said I'm strong enough to travel." His face went carefully blank. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. Maybe Denver. I can find work as a seamstress, raise the babies somewhere with more people. They have everything they need here." "Do they?" Nora met his eyes. "Or do they just have a man who feels obligated to care for his dead wife's namesakes?" Silas flinched like she'd struck him. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You never asked me to stay, Silas. You said I was stuck here through winter. Well, winter's over." "So that's it? You're just going to take them and go?" "They're my children." "I know that." His voice cracked. "I was there when they came into this world. I breathed life into Samuel when he wouldn't take his first breath. You think I can just watch them leave? Then give me a reason to stay that isn't about the babies." The words hung between them, a challenge and a plea. Silas crossed the room slowly. He stopped close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes, close enough to feel the warmth of him. "I can't promise you I'm healed. Can't promise I won't wake up some morning still drowning in grief. But I can promise I'll be here, every day, for you, not just for them." "Silas," I'm asking you to stay. Not as a mail-order bride, not as someone passing through. Stay because this is home. Because we're building something here, the four of us. Something worth keeping. Nora's throat tightened. What exactly are you asking me? I'm asking you to marry me. For real this time. Nora unpacked her carpetbag that night. Not because Silas asked, but because she wanted to. Because somewhere between March and May, between 3 graves and 2 cradles, she'd stopped running and started building. The wedding happened on a Sunday in June. Circuit Preacher Aldridge rode in from Badger Creek, along with Doc Voss and Mrs. Greta Faulkner from the neighboring ranch. It wasn't grand. No fancy dress, no flowers. Just Silas in a clean shirt and Nora in her best day dress, standing in the cabin with Grace sleeping against her shoulder and Samuel tucked in Silas's arms. Do you, Silas Crow, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Silas looked at Nora, really looked at her, at the woman who'd arrived broken and pregnant, who'd survived his grief and her own, who'd fought for every breath her children took. I do. And do you, Nora Byrne, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? She thought about Daniel, about the man who'd wanted her erased. Then she looked at Silas, at the man who'd taught her that love wasn't pretty words, but showing up when it mattered most. I do. They sealed it with a kiss that tasted like second chances. After the preacher left and the neighbors departed, Silas took Nora to the hill where 3 graves stood. She'd been avoiding this place, unsure if she belonged here among his losses. I need to tell them, Silas said quietly. He knelt by Catherine's grave, his hand on the weathered wood. I need to tell her about you. About the babies. Nora stood back, giving him space. Her name's Nora, Silas said to the earth. She's brave and stubborn, and she doesn't quit, even when she should. The babies came early, just like ours did, but these 2 fought their way through. His voice broke. I wish you could see them, Catherine. Grace has your determination, and Samuel, he's got that gentle spirit you wanted. He was quiet for a moment, then continued. I'm not replacing you. I could never do that. But I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in that cabin alone either. You wouldn't have wanted that. Nora knelt beside him, placing wildflowers on each grave. I'll tell them about you, she promised. About the woman who chose their names and loved them before they were born. They'll know you wanted them, that you fought for them. Silas took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. They planted wildflower seeds around the graves, purple and gold varieties that would bloom every summer. Then they walked back to the cabin where their children waited, where life continued in spite of loss. That night, as the sun painted the mountains orange and red, Nora stood at the window with Grace while Silas rocked Samuel to sleep. The baby's eyes were closing, his tiny fist wrapped around Silas's finger. Tell me again, Nora said softly. About what you want to teach them. Silas smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Everything. How to read the weather, how to gentle a horse, how to survive when the world tries to break you. And how to love? That too. He met her eyes across the room. Though I think we're still learning that one ourselves. Then we'll learn together. Outside, the wildflowers on the hill would grow through summer, turning grief into beauty, endings into beginnings. 3 graves remained, honoring what was lost. But inside the cabin, 4 hearts beat as one family, proving that some stories don't end where you expect them to. They transform. They become something new, something worth staying for. Grace and Samuel would grow up knowing 2 truths. that their mother was brave enough to choose life when the world offered her nothing, and that their father was strong enough to love again when grief said it was impossible. This wasn't the story any of them expected, but it was theirs, built on loss and redeemed by love. And that made it worth everything. If this story touched your heart, click the like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of resilience and unexpected hope. Tomorrow, we bring you another tale that proves the human spirit can triumph over even the darkest circumstances. You won't want to miss it.